You have 72 hours to vacate the premises, Kyle said. He didn't even look up from his phone when he said it. Nora Callahan had been standing in the doorway of her own office. The one with her name etched on the frosted glass, the one she had decorated with the framed photo of her mother on the day Callahan and Reed Architecture opened its doors. And she felt the words land somewhere between her sternum and her throat, like something had been swallowed wrong. 12 people sat around the conference table. Some were looking at their laptops. 2 were watching her. 1, Brooke Daniels, the associate director Kyle had hired 8 months ago, was doing something that might have passed for a sympathetic expression if you didn't look too closely. On what basis? Nora said. It wasn't quite a question. Kyle set his phone face down on the table. He had the practiced calm of someone who had rehearsed this. Creative direction misalignment. We've documented concerns going back 6 months. The firm needs to move in a different direction, and the partners have voted. Nora looked around the table. 3 of those partners had been at her mother's funeral. 2 of them had celebrated with champagne in this very room when she landed the Meridian Tower contract. Now they were studying the grain of the wood. The partners, she repeated. It was unanimous. That was a lie. She knew it was a lie before he finished saying it because Hazel Ng, not Hazel from the file, a different Hazel, her Hazel who had been her structural lead for 6 years, was the only one still meeting her eyes, and Hazel's expression said everything she couldn't say out loud in a room full of people who had already decided. Nora didn't argue. She had made a decision, months ago, about what she would do when this moment came. She had known it was coming the way you know a storm is coming in September. Not if, just when. Fine, she said. She turned and walked back through the open floor plan, past the drafting tables and the scale models, and the young architects who had stopped pretending to work, and she took the elevator down to the parking garage and sat in her car for 4 minutes without starting it. Then she called her lawyer. 7 months earlier, Nora had come back from a site visit in Kelowna to find a bill on her home printer that wasn't hers. It was a hotel invoice, 4 nights. The Rosewood in Vancouver. The room had been billed to the firm's discretionary account, which only 2 people could access, her and Kyle. Kyle had told her he was in Calgary that week for the infrastructure summit. She had stood in the kitchen of the house they shared in the annex, and she had held that piece of paper, and she had felt the particular coldness that comes not from shock but from recognition. Something clicked into place, the way he had started taking calls in the garage. The weekend he insisted on flying alone to meet the client in Halifax. The new password on his laptop that appeared 6 months after they stopped having meaningful conversations. Nora had put the invoice in her desk drawer. She hadn't confronted him, not yet. Instead, she had called her mother's solicitor the next morning. Walter Okafor had been handling the Callahan estate since before Nora was born. He was 71 years old and he wore bow ties unironically, and he had the kind of stillness that made you feel like whatever you were panicking about was survivable. She had sat across from him in his Bloor Street office and said, "Tell me everything about the partnership agreement. The original one, the one from when my mother started the firm." Walter had looked at her with the careful look of someone who already knows the answer to the question they're about to be asked. "What did you find? Just tell me about the agreement." So Walter had explained. When Dorothy Callahan founded Callahan Architecture 31 years ago, she had structured the ownership carefully, the way women of her generation had to, because they knew that the men who came later would try to renegotiate once the hard work was done. When she passed the firm to Nora 4 years ago and restructured the partnership to bring Kyle in, she had been very specific in the language. The founding partner's heir, Nora, retained a dormant 65% controlling interest held in a revocable trust. On paper the partnership split looked equal. That was intentional. Kyle had seen the surface documents and assumed he understood what he was looking at. He didn't. The trust had one activation clause. If Nora was ever removed from creative leadership without cause, or if evidence of financial misconduct was discovered, the full ownership structure would become visible to the board, and her interest would convert to active control immediately. "Your mother put it there in 2019, Walter said. "She told me she hoped you'd never need it. She also said she'd be shocked if you didn't." Nora had sat in that chair for a long time. Dorothy Callahan had been a difficult woman in many ways. Precise where Nora was instinctive, formal where Nora was warm. But she had been a builder. She built things to last. She built things that protected the people she loved even after she was gone. "What do I need to do?" Nora asked. "To be ready when he makes his move." "Document everything," Walter said. "And be patient." Patience had not come naturally. There were nights when Nora wanted to walk into the bedroom and put the hotel invoice on Kyle's pillow and watch his face. There were mornings when she arrived at the office before him, and sat in the chair by the window, and thought about how easy it would be to just say it. To say I know, and I know what you've been doing with the accounts. And I know about Brooke Daniels. I've known for months. She had worked too hard and waited too long to blow the plan for the satisfaction of 5 minutes. Her best friend, Juniper Walsh, was the only person who knew. Juniper was a family law mediator and she had the perfect poker face for it. She had heard worse things in smaller rooms, and she never let Nora see her worry on her behalf, which was its own kind of gift. He's going to do it, Nora said to her one night in March, sitting on Juniper's back porch in Leslieville with wine she wasn't really drinking. He's been meeting with Brooke separately. He's been telling the junior partners I've been difficult. He's building the case. Then let him build it, Juniper said. A case he builds becomes a case you dismantle. I hate this. I know. I hate pretending everything is fine. I hate going to those partner dinners and watching him put his hand on my back like we're okay. Juniper looked at her. Is there any part of you that still? No, Nora said, and then quieter. Maybe. Not him, what I thought we were. She had met Kyle Reed at a design conference in Montreal 8 years ago. He was funny and he was interested in her work and he asked questions that suggested he was actually listening to the answers. She had believed, genuinely believed, that they were building something together, the firm, the house in the annex, a future that looked like what she had always hoped for. The hotel invoice had not been the first lie. She understood that now. It was just the first one she had caught. By April, Nora and a forensic accountant named Ross Park had found $340,000 moved through miscoded vendor payments over 18 months. By May, they had connected 6 of those vendors to shell accounts. By June, a private investigator had confirmed what the hotel invoice had suggested, and added 3 more properties, and a paper trail back to Brooke Daniels, who had apparently been very busy for a woman who was supposed to be managing project timelines. Walter had filed everything carefully. Ross had prepared a report that left no room for interpretation. The investigators' findings were organized, sourced, and dated, and then Nora had gone back to work. She had attended the partner meetings. She had presented the Meridian Tower updates. She had been professional and focused and she had watched Kyle grow more confident with every week she didn't challenge him, and she had waited. She had waited for him to make his move. On a Tuesday morning in October he made it. Nora sat in her car in the parking garage for 4 minutes, and then she called Walter. It happened, she said when he picked up. When? 40 minutes ago. Unanimous vote, he said. 72 hours to clear out, right? She could hear him already moving. Emergency board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow morning at 9. I filed the trust activation papers this afternoon. The Financial Crimes Unit at the OPP has Ross's report. They've been expecting this call. I'll have the amended partnership documentation couriered to every board member by end of day. Nora rested her head against the headrest. Outside the car the garage was dim and smelled like concrete and exhaust, and she thought, absurdly, about the day she and Kyle had driven here together to sign the lease on this building. They had been so certain of themselves. And the other matter, she said. Ross will be available to speak with the investigators tomorrow. The shell company documentation is complete, Nora. Walter paused. Made a significant error. I know. He removed you from a firm you own 65% of. I know, Walter. There was warmth in his voice now. Your mother would call that poetic. That night, Nora drove to Juniper's instead of going home. She could not be in that house. She could not sit across from Kyle at the kitchen island and make conversation. Not when everything was finally in motion. Not when she was this close. Juniper opened the door and pulled her in without a word. They sat on the couch for a long time. Nora ate half a bowl of soup and didn't taste it. Tomorrow, Juniper said. It was a full sentence. Tomorrow, Nora agreed. Her phone lit up. A text from Kyle. Hope you're okay. This was a business decision, not personal. No hard feelings on my end. She showed it to Juniper without saying anything. Don't respond, Juniper said immediately. I wasn't going to. Good. Let him believe you're devastated. Let him sleep well tonight. It'll make the morning better. Nora put the phone face down on the coffee table and looked at the ceiling. She thought about her mother, who had structured a legal document in 2019 to protect a daughter from a betrayal that hadn't happened yet. Dorothy Callahan had never particularly liked Kyle. She had said so, once, diplomatically, in the way she said things she wasn't sure Nora wanted to hear. He's charming, sweetheart. Just make sure you understand the difference between charming and honest. She had been right. She was almost always right, and she was gone, and Nora would have given a great deal to hear her voice right now. I'm going to fix it, Mom, she thought. Watch me. Nora arrived at the office at 8:15 the next morning. She wore the gray blazer her mother had given her when she made partner. The one Dorothy had bought 3 sizes too large because she said it was the jacket Nora would grow into, not the one she was. At the time Nora hadn't understood what that meant. Now she did. The reception desk frosted when the security guard saw her. "Miss Callahan, your access card has been, check your system," Nora said pleasantly. "You should have received updated authorizations this morning." He frowned. Checked. His expression shifted into something that was not quite understanding, but was close enough. "I'm so sorry, please go right up." The elevator carried her to the 14th floor. The doors opened. The office was already half full and the murmur of conversation died like a radio switching off. Nora walked through it the same way she always walked. Straight, not fast, not slow. And she went into the main boardroom and took her seat at the head of the table. Walter was already there. So were 4 of the 7 board members, all of whom looked like people who had received an unexpected document at 11 o'clock the previous evening and had not slept well. At 8:55, Kyle arrived. She saw him through the glass wall of the boardroom. He was walking with the loose, comfortable stride of someone who had won, who was managing the aftermath, who was already thinking past this to what came next. Brooke Daniels was a step behind him. He was on his phone. He was smiling at something. Then he saw the boardroom. He saw the board members. He saw Walter. He saw Nora sitting at the head of the table where he had been sitting yesterday when he told her to leave. His stride didn't stop exactly. It stuttered. 1 step, then a half step, and the smile went somewhere else. He came through the door without knocking. "What is this?" he said. "I didn't call a board meeting." "I did," Nora said. Her voice was level. "Sit down, Kyle. You don't have standing to call a board meeting. You were removed from Mr. Reed." Walter stood up. He was not a large man, but he had a way of filling space when he needed to. "I need to inform you of a significant development in the firm's ownership structure." The blood left Kyle's face in a way that was almost interesting to watch. "What development?" Walter slid a folder across the table. "When Dorothy Callahan founded this firm 31 years ago, she placed a controlling 65% interest in trust for her daughter. That trust contained a specific activation clause, the attempted removal of Nora Callahan from creative leadership, or the discovery of financial misconduct by a partner. Yesterday morning, you triggered the first condition. The documentation you've this morning confirms the second." "That's not." Kyle picked up the folder. "Put it down. That's not possible. The partnership agreement shows equal." "The partnership agreement shows what Dorothy Callahan wanted you to see," Walter said. "The actual documentation tells a different story." Kyle looked at Nora. Really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. "You knew," he said. "It came out quiet, stripped of everything." "I've known since March," she said. "Since I found the invoice from the Rosewood. Since I had Ross Park audit the vendor accounts. Since I understood exactly what you and Brooke have been doing for the last 18 months. The board members, to their credit, had stopped pretending to look at their papers. $340,000. Nora continued. Moved through miscoded vendors and shell accounts. An ongoing relationship with a subordinate partner that you used firm resources to fund, and that creates substantial liability for the firm. A removal attempt built on fabricated documentation. She opened her own folder and distributed copies around the table. The Ontario Provincial Police Financial Crimes Unit received this package yesterday afternoon. I met with the lead investigator this morning. This is... Kyle's voice had lost its shape. "Nora, we can talk about this. There are explanations for some of this. There are consequences for all of it," she said. She looked around the table. "I'm calling for an immediate vote to remove Kyle Reed as managing partner, effective immediately, and to begin a formal external audit of the firm's accounts." Every hand went up except Kyle's. Walter said, simply, "Motion carries." The next 10 minutes were mechanical and terrible, and Nora watched them with the careful attention of someone who had imagined this scene so many times that the real version felt slightly unreal. Kyle's pass was deactivated. His access to the firm accounts was frozen. A board member she had known for 9 years walked him to his office to observe while he collected his things. Brooke Daniels was in the hallway when Kyle came out. She reached for his arm. He walked past her. Nora stood at her office window and watched the elevator doors close behind him. 72 hours, he had told her. That's how long he'd given her to leave. She hadn't counted how long this had taken. Less than 24 hours. The weeks that followed were not simple. Nora had known they wouldn't be. Taking back a firm is not the same as taking back an afternoon. There are legal processes and audit trails and staff meetings, where you look at the people who watched your removal and you have to decide, case by case. What they knew and what they were afraid of. Hazel Ng came to her office on the third day. She sat in the chair across from the desk and she said, "I'm sorry I didn't say anything in the room." "I know," Nora said. "I didn't know about the money. I knew about Brooke for a while. I should have." Hazel. Nora looked at her steadily. "You're still here, that matters." Hazel had been her structural lead for 6 years. She was methodical and brilliant, and she had an instinct for load-bearing problems that Nora had never found in anyone else. She made her the new associate director of engineering that same week. The OPP investigation moved efficiently. Ross Park met with investigators twice in the first 10 days, and the forensic trail was, as he put it, not ambiguous. Kyle's lawyer reached out within a week to discuss cooperation. The conversations were not warm. The process of ending her marriage ran parallel, like a second project she had to manage at the same time as everything else. Her family lawyer, a woman named Sandra Choi, who had once described her practice as precision demolition, was efficient and without sentiment in the best possible way. Kyle tried to have one direct conversation. He showed up at the house that was technically, equally theirs, on a Saturday morning when Nora was there to collect some of her things. "I need you to hear me," he said from the doorway. "No," she said and kept folding. "We built something together. 8 years. That has to count for something." She stopped folding. She turned around and looked at him, with the closest thing to patience she could summon. "You built something on top of what I had. That's not the same thing. Everything you want to claim as yours came from my mother's work, and my 20 years in this industry, and the trust of every client we have. And you tried to take it from me." He didn't have anything to say to that. The settlement Sandra presented was precise. The annex house would be sold, and the proceeds split according to documented contributions. Kyle received nothing from the firm, nothing from the Callahan family trust, and nothing he could reasonably call justice. Signed because Sandra had made clear, quietly, the way you make things clear when you don't need to raise your voice, that the alternative was a public trial in which everything Ross Park had documented would have become part of the public record of Ontario. He signed on a Thursday. Nora was in a site meeting. She found out when Sandra texted her a single word: "Done." She stepped out of the meeting for 30 seconds and stood in the hallway and breathed, and then she went back in. Callahan and Reed Architecture became Callahan Architecture in February. Nora had considered keeping the ampersand and replacing the second name, but in the end she wanted the simplest version of the truth. This was always her mother's firm and now it was hers. She made 3 promotions in the first month. Hazel, as mentioned, a young project manager named Tobias Birch, who had been quietly doing the work of someone 2 levels above him for 2 years. A senior associate named Morel Fontaine, who had left a competing firm to join Callahan and Reed specifically because of Nora's work on the Meridian Tower, and who had been visibly miserable under Kyle's management. She also sat down individually with the 3 junior staff members who had filed internal complaints about Kyle's conduct that had been ignored or buried. She did not make speeches, she said. Simply, "What you reported was real. It should have been addressed. I'm sorry it wasn't, and it won't happen again." One of them, a second-year architect named Bea Park, no relation to Ross, cried in the meeting and then apologized for crying. Nora handed her a box of tissues and said, "Don't apologize. You stayed." That took more courage than leaving would have. The firm began to settle into itself. There was still tension. There is always tension after something like this. A period where people are waiting to see if the new version of things is actually different, or just differently managed. But the tension was the productive kind. The kind that comes from people starting to believe again. Nora began sleeping through the night somewhere around March. She noticed it the way you notice the absence of something that's been there so long you stopped registering it as noise. She was seeing a therapist. Her name was Dr. Patricia Solano, and she worked out of an office on Queen Street West, and she had the valuable quality of not letting Nora deflect into logistics when she was actually trying not to feel something. "You've been in management mode since March of last year," Dr. Solano said during a session in April. "That was adaptive. It kept you functional. But you're allowed to grieve what you actually lost, not just strategize around it." "I don't know if I'm grieving Kyle," Nora said honestly. "I think I'm grieving who I thought he was. Those are different losses." "Yes, which one is harder?" Nora thought about it. "The second one. Because I chose him. I thought I was good at reading people. I thought I understood what I was building. And now? Now I think I was reading the version of him that wanted to be chosen, the version he showed me on purpose." She paused. "I don't know how to trust my own judgment about people anymore." "That's a reasonable thing to be working on," Dr. Solano said. "It was." She had met someone, a little by accident, in the way that things happen when you stop looking for them, because you have too much else to think about. His name was Fletcher Ossie, and he was a civil engineer who had been brought in to consult on a municipal infrastructure project that overlapped with the Meridian Tower site. They had argued about load tolerances in a site trailer in November, and then had coffee that turned into 2 hours. And then he had texted her a structural engineering joke that was genuinely funny, which was not a low bar but was harder to clear than it sounds. She had told Juniper had said with great composure, "Finally. He's been obviously interested for 3 months. He has not, Nora. He brought you coffee at the site meeting and you didn't even have to ask him how you take it." Fletcher had a daughter named Amara, 9 years old, who lived with him half the time, and had strong opinions about which subway stations had the best buskers. He had been direct about his life, the co-parenting arrangement, the custody schedule, the ex-wife he was on genuinely good terms with, in a way that had felt almost startlingly uncomplicated. "I should tell you I'm recently separated," Nora had said, the second time they had coffee. "I know," he said. "I read the news. I wasn't going to bring it up unless you did. It's been a lot." "It looks like it has," he said. "For what it's worth, the way you've handled the firm has been. I've worked with a lot of people in this industry. What you've done in the last 6 months is not small." She hadn't known what to do with that. She had looked at her coffee cup. "Thank you," she said. Thank you." They took it slowly. That was Fletcher's word for it, offered as a statement rather than a condition. "We can take this as slowly as you need." Appreciated the framing more than she'd expected to, because it was accurate. She did need to be slow. She needed to move carefully through this new version of herself and make sure she was doing it right. By the time the OPP laid formal charges against Kyle in the spring, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, misappropriation of funds, Nora had found a rhythm that felt cautiously like hers. She had sold the annex house and bought a condo in the West End with a rooftop terrace and a view of the lake. She had started cooking on weekends, badly at first and then less badly. She had joined the board of an architecture nonprofit that funded design education in under-resourced communities, which was the kind of thing she had always meant to do, and had always found a reason to defer. The criminal proceedings were not fast and they were not straightforward, because these things never are. Kyle pleaded not guilty initially, then changed plea in September when the full discovery package made his lawyer's position untenable. He was sentenced in November, 14 months in minimum security, 2 years probation, full restitution of the $340,000 plus penalties and interest. His professional engineering licenses were suspended pending the outcome of the civil proceedings. Nora attended the sentencing with Walter. She did not give a victim impact statement. She had chosen not to, and that choice was her own, and she didn't owe anyone an explanation for it. But she sat in the courtroom, and she watched the judge read the decision, and she felt, when it was done, not triumph exactly. Something quieter than that. She felt it was over. Outside the courthouse on a cold Thursday morning in November, Walter put his hand briefly on her arm and said, "Dorothy would be very proud of you." Nora looked at the sky for a moment. "I know," she said. "That's the part I'm still getting used to." A year and a half after Kyle cleared out his office, Callahan Architecture was awarded the contract for the new Civic Arts Center in Hamilton. It was the largest project in the firm's history. When the announcement came through, Nora read the email twice, and then she forwarded it to every person in the firm with a one-line message. "We earned this together." The response thread went on for 40 minutes. Hazel sent a structural engineering gif. Tobias sent 3 exclamation marks and then a 4th. Mirel called from the site she was managing and talked for 8 minutes without stopping. Nora sat in her office and let herself feel it fully, without immediately moving on to the next thing. That was new. She was practicing it. Fletcher came to the celebration dinner the firm threw that Friday. He sat next to her and ate the food and talked to Tobias about transit infrastructure for 20 minutes, and then afterward when it was just the two of them, walking along the waterfront, he took her hand and said, "You built something real." "My mother built the foundation," she said. "Yes, and you held it when someone tried to take it. That's not nothing, Nora, that's not a small thing." She had been thinking about something for a while. An idea for a legal fund, attached to the firm's community work, specifically for architects and designers who found themselves in predatory partnership situations and couldn't afford the kind of legal support she'd had. Walter was interested. Sandra had already offered to consult pro bono. She was starting to sketch out what that would look like. One evening in February she was working late at the office when her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered because she sometimes did and sometimes didn't, depending on how the day had been. Nora. She recognized the voice immediately, and every muscle in her body tensed. It's Brooke. The last time she had seen Brooke Daniels, she had been standing in the hallway of the 14th floor watching Kyle walk past her without stopping. Don't have anything to say to you, Nora said. I know. I'm not calling to ask for anything, I just. Brooke's voice was unsteady. I pled out in September, conditional discharge, 18 months community service. I'm in Winnipeg now. I wanted you to know that I understand what I did, not just to the firm. To you personally, I helped him. I thought I was. She stopped. It doesn't matter what I thought. I helped him, and I'm sorry. Nora sat with that for a moment. That doesn't fix anything, she said finally. I know, and it doesn't change anything about the investigation or the civil proceedings. I know that too. Are you done? A pause. Yes, okay. Nora ended the call. She sat in her quiet office with the city lights outside the window and she waited for the anger to arrive, and it did briefly, and then it moved through and past her and was gone. Brooke Daniels had made choices. The choices had consequences. Nora had no interest in carrying Brooke's guilt for her. She texted Fletcher. Long day. Are you up? He replied in 40 seconds. Always. Come over if you want. She packed up her things and turned off the office lights and drove across the city to his apartment, where Amara was long asleep and there was leftover dal on the stove, and Fletcher met her at the door with the expression of someone who understood, without needing to be told, that she just needed to be somewhere that felt safe. That was the thing she hadn't expected. Not the legal victory, not the firm's recovery, not even her own resilience. She had suspected she was more resilient than she'd been allowed to discover under the weight of a relationship with someone who had preferred her smaller. The thing she hadn't expected was this: that it was possible to find, on the other side of a significant betrayal, a version of trust that was actually better than the one you'd lost. Not more naive, more clear-eyed, built on actual evidence rather than the projection of what you hoped someone was. She knew Fletcher was honest because she had watched him be honest in situations where dishonesty would have been easier. She knew he was kind because she had seen him be kind when no one was watching. She knew he meant what he said because his words and his actions occupied the same space, consistently, over time. That was how you knew, she had learned. Not from how someone made you feel in the best moments, from whether they were the same person in every room. Kyle had not been the same person in every room. She understood that now, and the gift, if you could call it that, the thing that had come out of the worst year of her life, was that she could see the difference now with a clarity she hadn't had before. The Civic Arts Center broke ground in May. Nora stood on the site in Hamilton in a hard hat and steel-toed boots, and watched the earth movers and thought about her mother, who had stood on job sites exactly like this 30 years ago, and been the only woman in a hard hat for most of her career, who had built things and protected things, and had the extraordinary foresight to protect the thing she was most proud of even after she was no longer there to protect it herself. I did it, Mom, Nora thought, not for the first time. The wind off the escarpment was cold and sharp, and the sky above Hamilton was the particular blue of a clear spring morning in Ontario, and the earth was turning, and the building was beginning. Dorothy Callahan had started with a one-room office, and a belief that good design could change how people moved through the world. Nora had started with her mother's name and her mother's values, and a betrayal that had, in the end, done exactly the opposite of what it was intended to do. It had not taken everything from her. It had shown her exactly how much she had.